Hello and welcome to today's session, all about automating document label with SharePoint Syntex AI. So firstly, talk a little bit about the agenda of what we're going to discuss today. So we're going to be looking at understanding document management in SharePoint. We're going to be talking about what actually is SharePoint Syntex and the license costs which are involved with it. Predominantly, I'm going to be going through and giving you a demonstration of actually how SharePoint Syntex works and showing you how we can build our own document understanding AI model. Then we're going to talk a bit about how it can actually save you money, the services that Valto can offer you around this, and some general Q&As as well. So little introduction from myself. My name is Dougie Wood. I'm a solution architect at Valto, and I head up the consultancy side of Valto. I've got experience with Microsoft Cloud and document solutions for say, the past 10 years or so, and more recently, in the past couple of years, been focused on digital transformation solutions using Microsoft Cloud. So what are today's takeaways? So ideally, you'll be leaving this and you'll know the difference between a retention label and a sensitivity label. So these are two things which are commonly used nowadays inside of SharePoint, and you can manually apply retention labels and sensitivity labels, but as part of the SharePoint syntax, you can automatically apply them. That's something we're going to be taking a look at today. You'll also need to understand what a SharePoint content type is and how that's applied to a SharePoint document library, but we're going to cover off some of these terms before we jump into the deep end. And also comprehend how to use the SharePoint syntax to classify documents and extract data out of those documents. So we're going to be looking at an example of pulling out, for example, an email address from a workshop type of specification document. So the first thing to talk about then is what is a SharePoint document library? So what we're going to be looking at later on is uploading documents into a SharePoint document library and then automatically classifying them. But first off, what actually is a SharePoint document library? So every SharePoint site, whether it's a sort of intranet kind of site or a team site that's been in the background of a Microsoft team, every SharePoint site has a default document library. It's called documents, but you can add additional document libraries. Within reason, you can have as many document libraries, and they're all for storing files and folders. And that's where you kind of host your kind of documents and you can share them out with other people. You can create new documents or upload existing ones from other areas. You can share documents with colleagues using a share button, and even with certain SharePoint sites, you can send documents externally and share them to people externally. You can collaborate on the same document at the same time, which is what we refer to as co-authoring, where multiple people can work on the same time, and you can tag documents for filtering. So we'll be looking today at doing some tags around sort of sensitivity, retention labels, things like that. But you can also add other types of tags for filtering as well. So maybe it's review dates or approval dates, who the owner is of a document, who the contact is for that particular document, that sort of thing. You can also create your own views of documents inside your document library. So these are predefined filters. So it might be, say, for example, filter everything by a certain type of retention label. So say, for example, you've got a sort of finance retention label, which is say, retain these documents for 7 years. You might want to then create a view to say, show me everything which is tagged with finance. So the next thing to then understand is what is a SharePoint content type? Now, a content type is a reusable collection of metadata. So what we talked about before, those columns inside of a SharePoint library, and you can pre-build these so you can reuse them across multiple document libraries if you wanted to. Content types enable you to manage the settings for a category of information in a centralized reusable way. So you can have multiple different columns. You can have columns which are actually feeding from a centralized location. So let's say, for example, you've got a set of tags for a certain type of category, category 1, category 2, category 3. You can have a centralized place for that where you can update those categories, and then that'll apply to all the different areas of the documents that you could possibly tag using those categories. If you have many sort of document libraries, you'd like to have the same columns, fields, it will speed up the creation process. So say, for example, you're always creating a new document library for under a certain process. You can use the content types to then reissue exactly the same columns, the same tags and things like that to each document libraries. As I said before, you can centralize this. You can actually have a content type hub where you can have a centralized place to push all of these out. One of the main reasons why I'm mentioning this as a sort of prerequisite to SharePoint Syntex is actually this was a message that came up whilst I was setting this up as a proof of concept. But before using SharePoint Syntex on a document library, you need to ensure that allowing management of content types is enabled on the document library that you're applying it on. Otherwise, I found that there was a forbidden error message which came up, which obviously doesn't give you a huge amount of detail about what that is. So in the document library, there's a settings area you can get to by clicking the cog, click on library settings, and then in advanced settings, you would then find at the very top, it says allow management of content types. Quite often by default, that's set to no. You just need to make sure that's set to yes before you actually start trying to apply SharePoint Syntex AI models on top of your document library. So talking then about the types of labels that we can automatically tag documents with. So the first is a retention label. So retention labels help you retain what you need and automatically can delete documents that you don't need. They're also used to declare an item as a record as part of the records management solution for Microsoft 365 data. You can prevent documents from being deleted for a certain period of time. So like I said before, financial kind of documents, you might tag them and you want to prevent them from being deleted for 7 years. And you can force documents to go through a review process first or even auto delete them. So if it's a certain type of document, you know that no one's going to look at it after say 3 years or something like that, you can automatically delete it. And that can just help kind of mitigate document libraries hitting thresholds by sort of automatically deleting those documents after a period of time, and also the overall storage space of SharePoint and things like that, and making sure that that isn't maxed out either. So a general note there, so this requires a minimum business premium or an E3 license to actually use retention label. As I was saying before, you can use retention labels manually, so you can manually apply, for example, this finance label to your invoice documents in your document library. That's fine, you can manually do that as long as you've got obviously these prerequisite licenses down here. But what we're going to be looking at with the SharePoint Syntex AI is actually automatically labeling those documents with it. So the next type of label is a sensitivity label. So what is that? So a sensitivity label are used to add an additional layer of protection to your files or emails. They allow you to classify documents as confidential or highly confidential labels, which once applied determine what users can do and can't do with that particular file. It's basically a level of document encryption. So it's actually at the point of document that it's actually encrypted. You can prevent documents from falling into the wrong hands and control groups of users that can open documents. For example, you can have a director's label, which means that only that document can only ever be opened by a director. And say for in this scenario of like a user that's left the business, typically with sort of Office 365 SharePoint and things like that, although you can audit that where documents have kind of been downloaded and things like that, once they're downloaded and they're outside of your kind of environment, your ecosystem of Office 365, by default, they're just not protected. It would be the case of, say, for example, Joe Bloggs leaves the business, he's going to download all of your kind of sort of customer contact information, Excel spreadsheets onto a pen drive, take it home, put it into his computer, things like that. With a sensitivity label, if that was wrapped around that, say, for example, we'd classify this as confidential, meaning that it's only people internally that can access that. If Joe Bloggs did download that, put it onto a pen drive, took it home onto his home computer, and he's left the business, once his account's blocked, it will just open up and say, you need to log into this with a registered 365 email address and password, and it would realize that he'd no longer work there and it's blocked, and it would just basically encrypt the file so that no one could open them after that point. So it really is basically making sure your data is as safe as it possibly can be, because no matter where those documents go, it's going to be, those security is going to be applied to it. You can also apply things like watermarks automatically as well. So if it is highly confidential, you can automatically apply a watermark over the top of that. And just a note on that, that requires a minimum of Azure AD Premium P1 license to be able to get to it as a label. But again, just like with the retention labels, the sensitivity labels can be used independently on a SharePoint file. You don't need the SharePoint Syntex AI stuff for this. This is just another piece that we can use as part of Syntex. So after all that waffling on, what is SharePoint Syntex? So SharePoint Syntex is a Microsoft 365 service that helps organizations to use advanced AI and machine teaching to amplify human experiences, to automate content processing and transform content into knowledge. Basically, it automatically recognizes a type of document. The top piece is the Microsoft kind of sort of spiel about what it is, but essentially it automatically recognizes a type of document based on how you've trained it to understand documents. So it basically, you can load in documents and it goes, okay, I understand that. That's a proposal document. That's a workshop document. That's a training document or something like that. And then it can label documents as what it is. You can apply the retention labels to it and sensitivity labels to it based on some pre-configured categories. You can even extract key elements of the document that can be used as tags to filter and find the documents later. For example, extract the company name from a document to allow you to group all documents in the SharePoint document library by the company name. So that's something that previously data inputting would take some time, that you'd upload your document. And if you were categorizing your documents in that way, you'd have to manually go in and type in the name of the company name, which could lead to human error, and it's just generally time consuming in general. Syntex is available as a user-based add-on for Microsoft 365 plans. So to sign up for a free, well, you can sign up for a 30-day free trial or purchase Syntex via the SharePoint Syntex product page. So you can get a 30-day free trial, and as I found out this morning, because mine expired, you can also extend that for a further 30 days as well. So technically, you could get a 60-day free trial, which is more than enough time to have a sort of play around with this if you've got a sort of development environment. The license cost is £3.80 per user per month, but actually it's unlikely you're going to need a lot of users actually to have this system. Typically, you have a handful of people that are working on moving documents from a previous platform into SharePoint, and only those handful of people would need to necessarily be licensed to be able to use this SharePoint Syntex tool. Right, that's enough waffling on about that then. So let's actually take a look at this product then. So the very first thing that I'm going to show you is actually where you go to actually create what they call a content center. Now, the content center is essentially SharePoint Syntex. It's where you actually create all of these types of AI models and things like that. And one thing I found when I was looking around researching this product is not a lot of people were showing how you actually create a content center. So the way to do this is if you go into Office 365 admin centers, go to SharePoint admin center, and then under choose a template, you can actually select a content center here. And you don't have to call it content center. I've called mine that just because it's just easier, but you can call it whatever you like within reason. And you create that like you would do any other SharePoint site. So you keep it primary administrator, select the language and all that sort of stuff, time zones, click on finish. Then that will automatically spit out this site. So this is the SharePoint Content Center. So this is where you're now going to create all of your AI models, do all your AI training for your documents and things like that. So the very first thing we need to do is we click on the new, and then we're going to click on document understanding model. So this is what we're going to be creating. It's an AI model which is going to understand our documents. So the very first thing is, okay, well, give it a name. Now, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be training an AI model in live time, so hopefully everything goes well, to recognize my workshop documents. So when I've done a requirements gathering workshop, whether it's SharePoint or Teams or Power Platform, I want this to actually recognize that when I upload the document that it's a workshop document. So I'm actually going to call this my workshop document model. And then it's going to say, well, what model type? So actually, there's some pre-built types. So there's an invoice and there's a receipt processing types. Now, these basically are just highly trained AI models from Microsoft, which are prepared to recognize invoices and receipts really well. But because this is something brand new I'm creating, I'm going to click on this custom document understanding. So this is a brand new blank type of approach. Then under advanced settings, this is where we can then specify whether we're creating a brand new content type, so it's a brand new set of fields we're adding to a SharePoint library, or is it we're going to use an existing content type. So I'm going to create mine completely from scratch, so I'm going to create it as new. At the bottom down here, this is where we can specify these sensitivity labels and these retention labels. So that was just what we were talking about before. So actually, in this case, this account doesn't have access to any sensitivity label, so I'm not going to apply a sensitivity label, but I do actually have a number of different retention labels here. So I'm actually going to choose a customer data because these workshop documents are going to relate to customers. So basically, I've already predefined what this label is, which basically means it's going to retain the data for 2 years, and then it'll go for a retention review. So basically email me and say, do I still need to keep this document, yes or no? Now, all of that is actually configured in a totally different area. It's nothing to do with SharePoint Syntex AI. It's to do with a sort of compliance center inside of Office 365. So I'm just going to select customer data as the label that I want to be automatically applied whenever it finds a workshop related document. So I can click on create. And then it's going to bring me to my next page, which is my workshop document model page. So you can see here, it's got a couple of different bits and bobs, and this will all start filling out as I go through this process. Now, the process is actually a really simple 4-stage process across the top. So the first thing we need to do is we need to add in some example files. Now, if I click on this, it will actually show me any previous example files I've used. I've purposely deleted all these just to show you the process. But if you were doing a lot of training, you would have a lot of sample documents preloaded in here. But I'm just going to say on upload files, and then I'm going to go to my sample documents here. Now, what I would suggest is for when you're actually playing around with this and having a test is you want to have a set of 3 different types of documents. I find is the best way to do this. You want the first set is your model documents. Now, these are documents that you want to train your AI to recognize as this is the type of document you want. So in here, I've got a folder and I've got examples of different types of workshop documents that I've got in here. So I've got my Teams automation workshops, my Power Apps workshop, SharePoint and Teams Power Apps workshop, different types of workshop reports I've got in here. The other thing that you need to be able to train your AI is not just showing it what is a good example of a workshop document, it's also telling it what is not a workshop document. So in this case, I've got in here, these are sort of not reports. So these are ones which are not those documents. So I've got different types of ones in here. So whether it's related to sort of AD Connect deployments, business voice proposals, sales proposals, change request documents, things like that, things which have got nothing to do with actually a workshop document. I've got in here. So we can actually easily classify the differences between them. And then I've just got some general test documents. So these are actually different types of documents, which I can say these are workshop documents, and I can test these afterwards to see if it's actually going to categorize them in the right way. So the first thing I'm going to do is I need to upload my model document. So a handful of examples of documents which are actually workshop documents. I wanted to say, yes, these are workshop documents. Now, as a minimum rule of what you're doing, you roughly need about 5 example model documents of real documents that you want to classify as whatever it is you're trying to clarify that it's going to be, and you only need 1 document of something that it's not. So the not reports. Now, basically, the more you can give it, the more you can train it. Think of this as like you're training a dog, right? You teaching it to sit and you're sort of giving it a biscuit. It's the more you can give it, the more you can do for it, and the more you can train it with more documents. Obviously, the stronger it's going to be, the more powerful it's going to be, the quicker it's going to learn. But as a minimum, if you just have a little play like we are doing today, 5 example model documents and 1 non-example is all you need. So I'm just going to select these, open them up, and that will then upload all of these into my training files area. So whilst that's uploading those, I'm just going to select 1 document which I know is not a workshop report. So I'm going to use this AD Connect deployment document. So now I've got all those in here. I'm just going to select all of them and click on add. And that's then going to then start the process. It's added it into my files for training area. So I've got these ready to go. The next thing I need to do is I need to train my classifier. So what is a classifier? So the classifier is actually what is going to classify the document as something. So this is where I'm going to go now into here and train it to say, I want you to look out for anything which looks like it's a workshop report document. So I click on train classifier, and it's going to say, okay, well, I've loaded in here now all of the sort of training documents that you've got for me, and I can see what these look like. And now at the moment with this version of SharePoint Syntex, when you open up a document, it's literally going to strip out all of the formatting, any HTML, tables, colors, images, things like that, and it'll only show you the raw data that it's got for the file, because that's all it understands at this point in time is raw data, and it's looking for patterns in the way that the text is written into the document. So once we've selected these, what we're now doing is we're telling it, is this actually an example of a workshop report? Yes or no? And that's what it's saying up here. Is this file an example of a workshop document model? So I can say, yes, this one is, because it's a workshop report. The next one, Teams Automation Workshop. So yeah, there's a workshop document. This one's a SharePoint Teams workshop. So yeah, I say that one is as well. Now this one isn't. So Custom AD Connect Deployment, this isn't a workshop document. So I'm going to say, no, this isn't one. And you can see here, it's now understanding. I'm saying this is a positive result, this is a negative result, and these last two are workshop documents as well. So I can say, yeah, that one's a workshop document, and this one's a workshop document as well. So now we've got 5 positives and we've got 1 negative, which is all we need to get this off the ground. So I've got all of that in place. So that's now my labeling done. So I've now labeled these training documents. So I now need to move into the training tab across the top to start training this particular model. So now, basically, when it's saying explanations, what we're doing is we need to now say classify some examples of why this is a workshop document. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select. Oh, sorry, I missed a step here. I'm going to click on New across the top, and then I'm going to say blank. And then I'm going to say the type of explanation this is. So I'm looking for the title of the document. So this is actually shown in here, Digital Production System Workshop. So I'm going to say type, and then it's a phrase. So there's different types of things we can do here. So we've got phrase lists, which are words, phrases, patterns, numbers, or other types of characters, or we say regular expression, which is use a regular expression notation to match specific character patterns. So it's just looking for different patterns or particular phrases. So in here, I'm going to say workshop report, and then click on save and train, and then that's added that phrase in here for me. So this is now found a match for all of these, and it knows which one this is going to be. So it's just hidden by this little great job message. But now you can see the workshop document model classifier is 100%. So if this is anything less than 100%, then it's not very confident that it's actually going to work as a classifier. So the classifier is purely at this point just being able to determine whether this is a workshop report or not. So now I can click on my test button across the top, and then I can use an example file to see if it can determine this. So I'm going to upload a new file. So this is where I'm going to use a completely separate document, so I know that it's working. So I'm going to use test documents, and then I'm going to use Travel Africa. Upload that. And then once it's uploaded that, I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to click on the add button to add this into my test. So it's going to take a couple of seconds, but then positive result. Okay, so this is now determined this is a workshop document. Now, as another test, I'm actually just going to add in something I know isn't one of those. So I'm just going to go back into my not reports, and I'm just going to select another AD deployment in here. Oops, I've already got that uploaded actually. Let me just select that, click on add, and then that's going to add this. Oops. Let's add a different one. It might just get its knickers in a twist if it knows it's already been used before in the last model. So I'm just going to use this one. There we go. So now it knows that because this is a business voice proposal, it's a sales proposal, and it's not a workshop report, it's now showing it as negative. So this has worked 100%. It's worked that it knows the difference between a workshop report and it knows the difference when it's something that's not a workshop report. So that's fine. Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted to happen. So now we're going to click on exit training. So in theory, we've now got something which is running. we can classify documents, and we've got something enough at the moment that it can classify a workshop report and tag it with that customer data retention. However, what about if we want to extract some data from these documents? So we want to go one step further than just actually classifying the document and applying retention or sensitivity labels. We also want to extract data from the document. So this could be for a whole host of things. It could be you want to get the company name out of the document. You might want to get key data out of the documents. There's all sorts of different things you might want to extract out to then be able to filter inside of SharePoint afterwards. So in this case, I'm going to click on Create Extractor, and I'm going to go with a key contact. So I know in all of my workshop documents, I put in a key contact who is the main primary contact or stakeholder from that particular workshop. So in here, we can then specify what type of column it is, whether we're using existing column or we're creating a new one. I'm just going to say create a new one, and actually this key contact is going to be an email address, so I'm happy for it to be a single line of text. Oh, that already exists. So I've just got the key workshop contact. So now it's saying, okay, now I've got this list of documents, and I need to go through this and train it to find where this key contact actually is. Now, a little sort of hack of this is if you use Control F, I know that actually I've got the key contact in here. So mine's actually given this. So actually in the real Word document, this isn't obviously a big blob of text. This is actually a table. So key contacts is one of the columns in the table, and then underneath that is actual contact. So I just need to select, highlight that, and you can see now it's locked this in place about what this key contact is. If I just move on to the next document, you can see it's extracted that, so it understood what I've highlighted and it knows that this is what I want to extract for this particular document. Again, we're just training this at this point in time. We're just telling it, in this particular example, these are the email addresses that we want to actually extract out. In the next step, when we're actually training it, we're actually going to help it by understanding why it is this particular one, because you'll notice there's actually multiple email addresses. I've got Dougie Wood up here, so that's my own contact information and things like that. So there is actually multiple email addresses within inside of this. Now, what's also important is we've done our kind of workshop reports and things so far, but on the ones that we don't want, so we know that the customer AD connect deployment is not one, we're going to say no label, because we can say we know this is not something that is going to be inside of this. And for any other ones, for this next one, I'm going to say no label as well. So these aren't workshop reports, so I'm not going to try and extract anything from it, which is just as important in the process is actually telling it what it shouldn't be doing as well as what it should be doing. So again, I'm just going to search out for the key contacts in this. Select Tim. Sorry, this process is the longest part of it, so bear with me whilst I'm just doing this bit. But it is, as I say, it is a necessary process to actually make sure you've got plenty of examples of this to make sure that the AI is going to pick up on it. There we go. So now we've got all of our kind of what we wanted to extract out. So we know exactly what it is that we wanted to extract out, which is these email addresses of our key contacts. The next thing is we now need to train this extractor. So we click on train, and then we're in this next piece. So now we've got this, we need to say, okay, well, how are we going to determine what is the key contact? So how does it know that it's actually this that is going to pull out this email address? It's not going to pull out one of the other email addresses, because actually in these workshop documents, sometimes there can be all sorts of different email addresses in there. So it's worth kind of clarifying exactly which one that is. So to do this, we're going to click on new, and then we're actually going to click on from a template. So there's some really good examples in here what we can use. So the first thing is I'm going to actually use an email template. So it's going to look for things which look like emails. If I use this, it already knows what an email address looks like. This AI has seen email addresses so many times before, it knows what it looks like. So I'm going to select an email address, so it's a regular expression, and it knows what it's going to look like. So there's a bit of a formula here. You don't need to understand that too much, but basically what this is saying is it knows what an email address will look like, and this is how it's kind of formatted. So I'm going to click on save and train. And then this is then going to start training to be looking for email addresses. There we go. So now we've only got something which is 25% accuracy. Now, the reason why that's only 25% accuracy is because, as I said before, there's a lot of different email addresses in here. So how is it going to know that actually this is the email address of that key contact? So there's some other things we can do as well using these templates. So there's two things I'm going to use. The first one is going to be the before label approach. Now, the before label means what is going to be directly, what text is going to be directly in front of the label, the email address in this case that I'm trying to extract out. And I can say before label, and you can see ahead of me, it's already one step ahead. It already knows that from the phrase list, that key contact is actually the word that it's going to expect to see in front of it. I've not told it this. It's already predicted that the key contact is the word that it's going to find in front of it. So I'm going to say, yeah, that is right. And I can also add anything else. So if I ever predicted that maybe in some documents it isn't key contact, it's email, it's key email address or key stakeholder or something like that, I can break that out by actually adding multiple rows into this to tell it what it could expect right before it. So again, I can click on save and train. It's going to quickly go through all of those. Now it's applying both of these explanations. So now it's actually got something much better. We're now up to 88% accuracy. So we were much higher than we were before at 25%. So we've got a much better chance that we're going to extract the right thing. But let's go one step further. So if we click on new again and from template, and now I'm going to use the after label. So basically, this is exactly the same thing as I said before the label, but this is saying what we're going to find after the label. And again, some people get a bit hung up on that they want this to be exactly right of what it's going to say. And we don't always know what's going to come after this, because in my documents, there's different types of titles. So there's digital production, policy documents, preferred delivery dates, requirements, workshop findings. There's different titles that I use, but they're just some examples. So the document, the AI model knows the types of things that it's going to expect. It doesn't have to hit one of these lists, but it gives it a bit of a flavor about what it is. Again, we can add in more. So if I know other types of headings which are going to come after that particular thing, I can add more in if I wanted to. And then I'm just going to click on the save and train. And again, it's going to go through, it's going to train this, it's going to figure it out and say, okay, we're now at hopefully 100% accuracy. Perfect. That's exactly what we want to see. So the final thing is we want to test this. So again, we just want to see what is going to come out of this. So if I click on add example files, and I'm going to upload one of my test documents. We'll use the wool in this case. That's going to upload. Then I'm going to select that and click on add. And that's then going to start generating this. So it's added the document and it's now processing it. It's trying to figure out what it is. And there we go. We've now extracted Sarah Rhodes from our document. So we know that that's our key contact. And that's the email address that is pulled out from that particular document. So we know this now works. So we're happy with that. So I can click on exit training. So as a quick recap of then what we've done, we've added in our example files. We've classified them, so we know how we are going to determine that these are actually workshop report documents. And then we've added in an extractor, which is our key workshop contact. So that's how we're going to pull out who the key contact is from our document. And then the final step is we now need to apply this model. So we now need to apply this to an area inside of SharePoint. So just going back then, we need to apply this to a particular SharePoint site. So I've already got a SharePoint site that's created. So I'm just going to go here and I'm going to click on the cog, go to site contents. I'm going to create a brand new document library for this as an example. So I'm going to click on new document library. I'm going to call this my workshop reports library. And then I'm going to click on create. So I've got my SharePoint document library now. So it's ready to have the AI model layered on top of it. So the next thing I'm going to do is go back into here and I'm going to say apply my model. So it's going to say, okay, well, where do you want to apply this? Now, anyone who's kind of familiar with using SharePoint, you'll have seen this screen before using the copy or move to functionality. So it's quite easy to use. So I'm going to select my site and then I'm going to set my workshop reports library. And then it says a new view with model info shown, or new view with model info and file thumbnails. So you can have some nice like different kind of look and feels and things like that. So I'm going to just select a new view with model info and file, because this gives us a nice kind of thumbnail of what the documents will look like. So I can click on add, and then I can click on go to library, and then this is then got my library here ready to go. So if I click on upload and then click on files, I've got my test documents here. So I'm just going to upload all of these into here. So this is going to start processing, loading the documents into here. Apply to it, it starts processing all of this. Now, depending on what you uploaded, the size of the documents and how quick your internet speed is, this can take a few minutes to do. So rather than me waiting around for this, in true Blue Peter style, here's one I prepared earlier. So this is what it would look like. So once it's finished processing, it will have extracted out everything. It realizes the sort of content type. So that'll be the name of the content type, and this proof of concept one I've just called example. But imagine that said our workshop report. The key contact, that's actually who it's extracted out. And the retention label is the customer data label that is then applied. So then, because this has got this label applied to it, if I try to delete this document, for example, it would actually give me a message to sort of say, well, actually customers data will allow me to delete it. But if this was financial data, for example, it will prevent me from deleting it. A little message would come up and say, you can't delete this. But because it's customer data that this applied to, it will give me a reminder after 2 years to say, do I still need to keep this? So that's actually my mistake. That's actually based on the retention label there. So as a sort of end-to-end, that's essentially how it kind of works in terms of setting up your kind of classifiers, how you're going to sort of classify your documents, how you can extract documents, and then you can test it, and then you can easily apply it. So you can see here, within half an hour, you can get a very basic proof of concept running using SharePoint Syntex. So just going back then, how can this actually save you money? So in previous projects that I've worked on in days gone by, it would take a lot of time actually sort of getting someone who's typically a junior, an apprentice or graduate or something like that to actually work on a project like this, where you've built out your SharePoint structure, and then it takes usually months, if not potentially a year or so, to actually get all your documents across and tag them in the relevant kind of way. And inevitably, this will take up more time from senior kind of people to actually go in and classify individual documents and things like that. And this ends up taking up a lot of time, which basically means a lot of money. And what you can now do with SharePoint Syntex is it speeds up that whole process. So you've seen how quick and easy this is to get going. It still requires small amounts of classification time. So as you've seen there, as a 5-to-1 kind of rule, where you've got 5 examples of the real document against 1 example of something that it's not, an example of a document that is not, you'll still need to do that. And if anything, in a production environment, I would really scale that up. I would be having plenty of examples of different variables and things like that. So it really will have a good understanding about what the document is as soon as it hits it. But then auto labeling is incredibly quick. So once you've kind of set all that time up, it's something that you can get going very quickly. So projects that once took months or years to do is now reduced down to literally weeks, because you only need a handful of days from people who actually know what these documents are to be able to classify them, and then you can move them in. And as I say, it's only £3.80 per user per month, and quite often once you've got those kind of documents in, you might not even necessarily even need to use SharePoint Syntex in the future if it was just a big bulk kind of move across type of job. Cool. So some services that we can offer. So basically, Valto, we can deliver all the different SharePoint services that are involved with this type of process. So consultations and helping understand different document classifiers and things like that. Actually all the way through for deploying it and configuring it in a way that's going to make sense to you, and providing training as well, so people understand how all of this AI model works. And we also provide additional kind of support. So if you're interested in any of this, you can contact us by using that hello@valto.co.uk. Our other support kind of token process. So if you're new to kind of Valto, One way that we do offer kind of support to our clients is that we have a ad hoc support process where basically 1 hour is 1 token, and you can buy batches of tokens and have that time on account, and you can call them off for all sorts of things. So it doesn't have to just be SharePoint related, it could be Power Apps, Power Platform related, Microsoft Azure, Microsoft 365, security, EMS, all that good stuff. And yeah, you can call that time off as and when you need us. The other thing as well, just before I jump into the sort of Q&A section, is just plugging our next event, which is about migrating files to Microsoft 365. So in the same kind of vein about SharePoint and getting documents across, we're going to be doing something on Wednesday, the 15th of June, 3:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Basically talking about Microsoft files and how to migrate them, and some pitfalls that people often walk into, and everything else that you should be thinking about if you're considering a migration of files into Microsoft 365. So I'm just going to look at the QA and just see if there's any questions. If you do have any questions, there is a QA section inside of this Teams live event, so please feel free to ask anything. Let's have a look. So there's a question there, can Syntex be used to help scan expense receipts? Yeah, it can do it. I mean, technically it can scan anything you wanted to scan, really. You just need to train the model. So if you've got plenty of examples of expense sheets, you could use that as a way of exporting that data out. I think there is actually some other kind of AI models pre-built, so as I said, like invoicing and things like that. So it's a similar kind of concept, really. So another question, can I license only a certain amount of users on the platform, or does everyone need a license? You only need to license the users that are going to be kind of using the AI essentially. So as part of most kind of projects, you would necessarily use this to sort of bring everything across and bulk kind of tag things. It's something that in the past we've done a lot of projects where we need to move things across, tag them and things like that. And it's been a very manual process for somebody. So you only need to necessarily license the people that are going to actually be using this particular product. Is the business premium or E3 license only required for the person applying the label? Sorry, I've read that wrong. Is the business premium or E3 license only required for the person applying the label? So yes, so it's the person that's going to be sort of using the kind of document and involved with that kind of compliance process. So question there, how good is Syntex at processing less structured documents than the examples you've used? Is it dependent on keyword training? Good question. And to be honest, this is only really as good as what you can kind of predict. So you have to be able to train it. It's not magic in the sense that you can just give it a handful of things. The examples I've used are quite structured, so I always know that I have certain types of wording in my documents and things like that. You can do a lot of predictive stuff, so you can put a lot of things in that you think that it could be, but essentially it's something that you might, if you're going to be using over a longer period of time, it's something that you would need to be kind of staying on top of and training it to keep on top of how it's actually interpreting these documents and things like that. So if there's new types of structures coming through the documents, obviously you need to be keeping updates with that and almost allowing your AI to be aware of what's kind of it can expect coming through. So just conscious of time, we're going to be wrapping up now. If you do have any other questions, feel free to contact us, hello@valto.co.uk if you have any other questions about this, or you'd like to have a conversation about SharePoint or Syntex or any of those other pieces, please feel free to reach out to us. This will also be recorded and put up onto our YouTube channel, and a link will be sent out. So if anyone's not been able to make it, or you want to forward this on to any colleagues, please feel free to do so. Okay, thank you very much for your time.